start mastering this file, and we're going to start to add some of those adjectives of punchy, shiny, and loud. So let's listen to the audio file right now and get an idea of what it sounds like as a mix before we do any mastering. Now, there's one little caveat here. I'm going to try not to talk while this file is in playback mode, and it's hard to get me to stop talking, so enjoy it while you can. But let's take a listen to this, and one other caveat is that as we make this file louder, the compression that we use when we make the videos that you watch here at macprovideo.com might actually alter the sound a little bit. So keep that in mind. I'm going to try my best to minimize that audible compression from the video encoding process. But for right now, let's listen to the project in its raw state. This is exactly the way that it came out of Cubase, or this could be the mix as it comes out of Pro Tools or Logic or Digital Performer, any of the other DAW software programs. So let's take a listen to this file, and I'll keep my mouth shut.
Driving through this town.
Now, I just hit the space bar. The space bar is the easiest way to start and stop a project. But you can also use the transport controls that appear here in the switcher. So here's play, stop, loop, and record, but basically you're just going to use stop and play for this tutorial. And when we were listening to that project, we've got a good solid mix. We can hear all the instrumentation, we can see the drums are nice and punchy, but we want to give it more of a rock and roll master. So I'm going to use a plugin that comes with Wavelab 7 called the multiband compressor to add that punchy quality to the overall mix. So what I'm going to do is come into the master section, into the effects slots, and in the first slot I'm going to add the multiband compressor, which can be found in the VST3 category under the Steinberg plugins, and then I'm going to choose multiband compressor. And the multiband compressor is like a normal compressor, except that it works on 4 separate frequency bands: lows, low mids, high mids, and highs. And let me give you an idea of what I'm talking about. I'm going to play this project back, and I'm going to use the solo buttons to solo each of those frequencies so that you get an idea of how this multiband compressor treats all those frequency bands separately. So let's take a listen. There's the low frequencies. It's just a rumble. In fact, you might need a subwoofer on your studio monitor system to really hear what's going on in that low frequency band. So let's unsolo that and go to the low mid frequencies. So what are we hearing? The fundamentals of the vocals, some of the drums, the organ. Let's move on to the next frequency bands, which are the high mids. Now we're starting to hear just the crispy parts of the instrumentation. And then the high frequencies are just the hints of the crispiness, or the treble frequencies, the high frequencies. So the multiband compressor separates the frequencies into those frequency bands and then compresses them at different rates. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have us listen to some of the built-in presets and how those presets can radically change the sound of this master. So I'm going to unsolo that high frequency band and just start playback. And I'm going to come up here to the presets window and go to the factory presets. And over here, you can see that there are quite a few factory presets from which to choose. And since this is a ballad, I'm going to start with the ballads, but it's also possible that these rock settings might do a really good job too. And if you ever need to reset the settings of the multiband compressor back to the factory standard, you can choose reset. But I'm going to start playback, and then while we're listening very closely, I'm going to call up some of these presets and hear what they do to the master.
Shine. You knew just how to make me laugh. I wish my mind would just stop hoping for what will never be.
Now that last one really sounded overcooked to me. That Rockmaster number 3 wasn't really the right sort of compression settings for this particular project. But what I did like was that Ballad Master number 2. Let's take a listen to that one again. So I'm going to call up Ballad Master 2 and I'm going to start playback, but during the playback I'm going to come over to this little button. This is the bypass during playback button. When the checkbox is green, it means that the effect is enabled. When I click on it and it turns into a red minus, that means that that particular plugin is disabled. So it allows the signal to pass through the plugin without adding any of the processing. And that button is exactly the same on the control panel of the plugin as it is in the master section effects slots. You'll notice that they also have individual little enable buttons. So using those enable buttons allows you in real time to go through and listen to the before and after and make critical comparisons. So what I'm going to do is start playback now, and in the middle of the playback, I'm going to enable and disable this processing, and you'll see what the multiband compressor is doing to especially the drums, but the overall mix to add that punchy quality. Here we go.
Somewhere between love and laughter. Things were fine before that decade. Why the sudden change of fortune?
So I like what the multiband compressor is doing so far with the Ballad Master 2 settings, but one thing I am going to change is the output level. You'll notice that the overall output level has been goosed by about 3 dB. What I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on that 3 dB and enter 0, and that will bring the output of this plugin back to 0 dB, because I'm going to change the volume of this project at the end with the master limiting. So let's take a listen to the effect now, before and after I have changed this output setting. So with the compressor enabled, let's take a listen.
I'm waiting. I'm waiting somewhere between love and laughter.
So we've really added a lot of punch and drives to the drums and the whole rhythm section, and because the vocals that exist in the low mids and the high mids frequency bands, they really start to find their own space within that mix. So now that we've added the punchy part of punchy, shiny, and loud, let's go to our next video